At the height of dissatisfaction with centralized systems, a quiet revolution emerged: Ethereum. Vitalik Buterin and his co-founders proposed something completely different. No longer depending on a central authority to validate transactions or govern systems, but allowing every participant from anywhere in the world to have the same voice and the same ability to influence decisions. Ethereum was not just a cryptocurrency. It was an open platform that provided the tools necessary to build a new kind of organization, decentralized and autonomous. It was the chance to destroy the old structures and build something fairer and more efficient. Ethereum, unlike Bitcoin, was not created to be just a currency. It emerged with the idea of transforming contracts and transactions into automated code without intermediaries and without the need for trust in a third party. This paradigm shift was crucial for the birth of DAOs, organizations that operate entirely on the blockchain, using smart contracts to make decisions and execute transactions. Decentralization began to take shape not only in the concept of money but in governance, operations, and actions. What once seemed distant or even utopian was about to happen: the creation of a new type of organizational structure. The real revolution of Ethereum was not just in its technological innovation, but in its philosophical proposal: a society where power was not concentrated but distributed among all. The creation of DAOs became the real possibility to transform any organization into an entity where members have an active voice and decisions are made democratically and transparently. Ethereum was not just a new code, it was the foundation for a new future, fairer and more accessible. And the best part, without intermediaries. The real magic of Ethereum was not just in being a blockchain platform, but in its ability to automate processes and decisions. The introduction of smart contracts was a game changer. Instead of relying on an intermediary to ensure a contract was honored, Ethereum introduced the idea of self-executing contracts, which automatically fulfilled the agreed-upon conditions, without the need for trust between the parties. This functionality became the foundation for the creation of DAOs, where the governance and operational rules of an organization could be programmed into the code and followed without human questioning or errors. These smart contracts allowed participants in a decentralized organization to be more than just simple voters. They could, through their interactions with the blockchain, make binding decisions autonomously. This eliminated the need for trust in a centralized figure, whether it be a CEO, a government, or any other institution with power. The code, not. A person became the final arbiter of actions. As a result, DAOs became not only a technical possibility, but a new philosophy of how we can organize and govern ourselves fairly and impartially. At the heart of this innovation was a powerful idea. Power should not be controlled by a single entity, but distributed among all the members of the organization. Every decision, every financial movement, every contract had to be transparent and visible to all, without the manipulation of information. Ethereum's smart contracts enabled this utopia of transparency, as decisions were made according to the rules written in the code, immutable and publicly accessible. This open-source, decentralized governance system became the solid foundation for the creation of DAOs, changing how we view power and participation in organizations. DAOs represented a true revolution in the way we conceive the concept of organization. In the traditional world, decisions were centralized and often made by a small elite of power, disconnected from the needs of the majority. With DAOs, anyone who had a token could, directly and equally, participate in decisions. No longer a rigid hierarchical structure, but a horizontal system where all members of the organization had the power to vote, discuss, and shape the entity's future in a democratic and direct manner. This meant for the first time that people were not just passive participants in a system, but actively responsible for its direction and success. The impact of this was profound. DAOs gave rise to a new governance paradigm. Instead of relying on representatives or managers who could act dishonestly or opaquely, decisions were made with total transparency, recorded directly on the blockchain, and immutable. The truth was right there, visible to all, with no room for manipulation or deception. This allowed DAOs to become more agile and trustworthy governance systems, without the traditional bottlenecks and inefficiencies that characterize centralized bureaucracies. Furthermore, the decentralized nature of DAOs brought with it a new form of inclusion. Anyone, regardless of location or financial status, could create, participate in, and influence a DAO. There were no longer geographical, political, or economic barriers preventing someone from engaging in the decision-making process. This democratized access to power and participation in organizations brought a sense of equality that had previously seemed impossible in centralized systems. DAOs were not just about a new technology, but about a new kind of society, fairer and more inclusive. The impact of DAOs was not limited to the technological sphere, but expanded to transform the global economy. Organizations that once relied on financial intermediaries, consultancies, or complex bureaucratic processes began to restructure into simpler and more direct models. With the use of smart contracts and the power of decentralization, companies, investors, and even governments began to realize the enormous potential of DAOs to reduce costs, increase efficiency, and create new economic opportunities. The idea that organizations could be self-sustaining, operating in a completely decentralized way without relying on large institutions, marked a turning point in the history of the economy. One of the great promises of DAOs was the possibility of creating fairer and more accessible economies. For example, in a DAO, anyone who owned tokens could be an active participant without needing the initial capital or privileged connections that would be required in a traditional model. This leveled the playing field, allowing people from anywhere in the world to have the same opportunities to influence decisions and grow financially. DAOs provided a platform where meritocracy and real participation were possible, without the obstacles imposed by traditional hierarchies. With the growing number of DAOs emerging in various sectors, from decentralized finance, DeFi, to collaborative governance systems, it became clear that decentralization was not just a technological trend, but a transformative force capable of redefining the future of global economies. DAOs began to challenge the status quo, questioning traditional models of work, investment, and governance. And Ethereum was the solid foundation on which this new paradigm of decentralized organizations was built. The true transformation was only just beginning. Despite their revolutionary promise, DAOs are not without challenges. Scalability remains one of the most complex and crucial issues for DAOs to expand effectively. As the number of participants grows and more transactions need to be processed, the network can become slower and more expensive, especially on platforms like Ethereum, which until recently faced limitations in terms of transaction processing capacity. These limitations put at risk the efficiency of DAOs, which depend on a solid infrastructure to function without interruptions or failures. Moreover, security and the risks of failures in smart contracts are constant concerns. While the code is immutable and transparent, it can also be vulnerable to errors or attacks. In 2016, the DL hack case was a dramatic example of the risks involved. A bug in the code of a smart contract allowed a hacker to withdraw a large amount of funds from a DAO that was in operation at the time, causing significant damage. While the incident led to the creation of more robust security measures, the event made it clear that DAOs need to be designed with extreme caution and undergo rigorous audits to avoid catastrophic failures. In addition to security and scalability, the governance model of DAOs also faces challenges in decision-making. Since DAO participants are often dispersed globally with divergent interests and views, reaching consensus can be a long and complex process. Furthermore, in some DAOs, the amount of tokens is not necessarily proportional to the actual interest or contribution of a member, creating inequalities in decision-making power. In some cases, token holders with large amounts may, inadvertently or intentionally, monopolize the decision-making process, which can undermine the promise of equitable governance. Therefore, there are still issues of fairness and effectiveness that need to be addressed for DAOs to become a truly effective solution for decentralized governance and operation. Despite the challenges that still need to be overcome, the future of DAOs looks promising. Technology is constantly evolving, and new solutions are being developed to address issues like scalability and security. For example, Ethereum's upgrade to Ethereum 2.0, which includes the shift to proof-of-stake (POS) consensus, aims to drastically improve transaction speed and reduce operational costs, which could alleviate one of the biggest obstacles faced by DAOs. Additionally, the development of new blockchain platforms that are faster and more efficient also offers the possibility of creating even more robust and accessible DAOs. However, the potential of DAOs goes beyond technical efficiency. They have the power to redefine how societies function, how businesses operate, and how people interact with each other. In a future where DAOs are fully integrated into the global economy, we could see the rise of new business models, more transparent, inclusive, and collaborative. Organizations that once required large corporate structures and dedicated employees could transform into self-sustaining systems where decision-making is done democratically, directly, and fairly. The impact of this will be immense, bringing about a new era of collaborative governance and shared prosperity. Finally, the greatest legacy of DAOs may be the empowerment of individuals around the world. regardless of their background, location, or social status. Decentralization, by allowing everyone equal access to governance and participation in decisions, could level opportunities, create new forms of global collaboration, and transform local and international economies. DAOs represent not just a technological innovation, but a paradigm shift in how we organize and interact as a society. And as technology evolves, the impact of DAOs could be deeper than anyone imagines, offering a new vision for the future of humanity. Decentralization goes far beyond the simple use of blockchain. It is a governance philosophy and distribution of power that can gradually transform all aspects of society, from government to business and communication networks. DAOs, by allowing governance without intermediaries and with direct participation, have the power to extend this concept to even broader spheres of daily life. In a decentralized world, individual autonomy and the transparency of actions would be the fundamental principles, creating an ecosystem where every person has a voice and decision-making power. However, this decentralization process is not immediate. It requires a shift in mindset and a collective effort to embrace new ways of interaction and governance. For DAOs to truly transform the global social and economic landscape, it is necessary to restructure the power dynamics traditionally concentrated in governments and large corporations. Decentralization is not just a technological issue, but a real cultural change in which people are called upon to take on new responsibility over how organizations function. Furthermore, DAOs could be the key to empowering marginalized populations and giving a voice to individuals and communities that have historically been excluded from decision-making processes. For example, in places with authoritarian regimes or where corruption is endemic, DAOs can create a space where governance is more fair, more transparent, and more accessible. This is one of the greatest promises of the movement, decentralizing power in such a way as to create a more equitable and just global society for all. By moving away from the traditional, centralized and hierarchical governance model, DAOs offer a truly democratic and transparent governance model. Every member of a DAO, by owning tokens and participating in votes, has an active voice in the decision-making process. This eliminates the risk of governments or large corporations manipulating information and making decisions without the consent or interest of the majority. Instead, DAOs promote an environment in which power is equally distributed among all participants, and the actions of the organization are governed by code, not political convenience or personal interest. One of the greatest challenges of traditional democracies is the disconnection between representatives and the represented. Politicians often make decisions that favor private interests or elites, ignoring the real needs of the population. With DAOs, this disconnection is broken, as anyone, regardless of their social standing, has the power to directly influence the decisions of the organization. DAOs, with their decentralized governance model, allow the decision-making process to be genuinely inclusive and based on principles of fairness and equality, giving everyone the opportunity to shape the collective future. This model can also be particularly impactful in areas where corruption and abuse of power are prevalent. In a DAO, governance actions are recorded transparently on the blockchain, making them immutable and accessible to all. This creates a system of checks and balances where no one can act unilaterally or in secrecy, because all transactions and decisions are auditable and visible to all members. As such, DAOs represent not only a technological revolution, but a chance to create more integrated and accountable political systems where the true will of the people can be executed without distortion or manipulation. The path of DAOs is just beginning. With each new step, new possibilities arise to create even more self-sustaining organizations. The decentralization of DAOs goes beyond the simple distribution of power. It brings with it the concept of organizational systems that do not depend on centralized leadership or traditional corporate structures. This implies a fundamental shift where the organization itself can self-regulate and generate its own resources without the need for large initial investments or conventional business models. DAOs can, therefore, be seen as the starting point for a new type of economy, one that is not only decentralized but also more efficient, more resilient, and less vulnerable to global economic fluctuations. Furthermore, DAOs allow for the creation of incentive systems directly aligned with the interests of their members. Through smart contracts and tokenization, participants can be rewarded with tokens or other forms of compensation for their contributions. This creates a structure where individual actions align with collective goals, making the organization more dynamic and motivated to achieve its own objectives. These incentive models are also immutable and transparent, meaning all participants know exactly what to expect, creating a cycle of trust and collaboration that, in the long run, can result in a self-sustaining and adaptive governance system without the need for external intervention. The biggest challenge, however, will be scaling DAOs effectively without compromising the fundamental principles of decentralization and fairness. This means finding technical and organizational solutions that allow DAOs to grow while maintaining transparency, equity, and active participation from members. At the same time, it is essential to ensure that governance within DAOs remains inclusive, without being dominated by specific interests or large investors. The journey of DAOs is an ongoing test of the concepts of democratic and decentralized governance, with the potential to profoundly transform not only organizations but the very social and economic structure of the global landscape. As DAOs gain strength and adoption, they have the potential to trigger a radical shift in global economies. Traditionally, the world economy is dominated by national governments, central banks, and large corporations that control the flow of capital and economic decisions at high levels. With DAOs, decentralization can challenge this structure, creating more distributed and democratic economies. DAOs could potentially provide an alternative to the traditional financial system, allowing economies to be governed by the people, for the people, rather than by a corporate or political elite. The idea of a decentralized global economy based on principles of transparency, collaboration, and equality could, over time, transform the way we think about wealth, power, and the distribution of resources. One of the biggest benefits of this decentralization would be the reduction of the concentration of power and wealth in the hands of a few. In a DAO, Any member can influence the future of the organization based on merit and active participation. This creates a new type of economy where rewards are distributed more fairly and transparently, based on the real value that individuals and groups contribute to the system. In a world dominated by DAOs, wealth would not just be accumulated by large corporations or elites, but redistributed among the people, fostering more inclusive and sustainable economic growth. However, this new world order requires substantial changes not only in the economic field, but also in the political and social spheres. For DAOs to truly transform the global landscape, governments and legal systems will need to adapt to recognize and integrate these new forms of organization. Additionally, it will be crucial that DAOs are regulated to ensure that their decentralization does not lead to chaos or exploitation of vulnerabilities. The success of DAOs on a global level depends on a balance between technological innovation, political adaptation, and global collaboration, with the aim of building a more just, transparent, and efficient economic system.